So this is an update on my Bitcoin prediction. In the end of January, I predicted Bitcoin would tank. So far, that prediction has been correct. Find out why. This is a case study on astrology, not necessarily cryptocurrency, but you might learn a little bit about both.
Check this out.
Okay, so I'm doing an update on a formal update on the prediction that I made about Bitcoin. Around the end of January, like January 23rd or something, I made the prediction that Bitcoin was going to tank. I said Bitcoin's going to tank. Now at the time it had already dropped quite a bit from its highs of around 20,000. Even in January, even in early January, it had gone as high as about 17,000. And at the time I made the prediction, which was around this January 13th, it was around this time, like January 20th or something. It was about 11,000, 12,000. So it was still, it was holding around 10,000, 11,000 after having been as high as 20, then even as high as about 17,000 a couple of weeks earlier. At the time, it was 11,000. There was no reason to think it wouldn't jump back up. Some people were saying, I'm going to go to 50. It's just a temporary blip and all this. I said at the time, no, it's going to tank. And I also said, to be, completely fair, that it's not something that we may not know this for a couple years because it could be a long game. But I gave indications as to why I thought this, and they're astrological. I want to make the caveat up front. I don't care about cryptocurrency. I don't invest in Bitcoin. I don't have any interest in Bitcoin, frankly, as an investment or anything else. This is an astrological prediction, not a cryptocurrency prediction. I'm trying to make the separation because people see this and then they think I'm making a prediction about cryptocurrency and what they should do with it. I'm not. It's mainly an astrological case study, okay? Because I have an astrology chart here that I'm going to be looking at, and it's actually to test astrology, not to speculate on Bitcoin. But this is just a follow-up on what I had said at the time and how these things are, you would say, sort of working out at the time. So at the time, there was plenty of opportunity for me to completely blow it, and there were other astrologers I know who were pretty high on Bitcoin. They were saying, oh no, you should invest in it, it's low, it'll go way up and whatnot. Again, I didn't look at why they said it or whatever, but there's a lot of opinions about what to do with Bitcoin, okay? So my prediction was based on the chart of Bitcoin because we do have a chart that I believe is reliable. I'm going to also explain that. As for, that shows when Bitcoin began as a company. Now, some people dispute the chart. This is the chart of the first blockchain being opened. Like the first time that the Bitcoin was ever used, basically. Like the first dollar that was ever spent or whatever. It's like the $100 pizza is what it's called. And this was the first transaction using the currency. Now, some people say that this isn't the best chart to use because it was like the name was established or there was an incorporated LLC set up earlier and all this other stuff, and that's when you should make the chart. I don't agree. I use this chart, and I'm going to explain why. So again, this is an astrology video, so if you're just interested in Bitcoin and what to do with it, you might leave because I'm not going to be answering this, but I'm going to be answering like, when do you make a chart, right? Is it conception? Like, for example, a chart of a country, a chart of a company. When do you do it? Well, again, there's examples where there could be an incorporation, like when the articles of incorporation are filed or something like that, or deeds or whatnot. The reason I opted for this one is because, first of all, it's cryptocurrency. There's no owner. It's an enterprise that is kind of a shared, fiat capital system that is mired in secrecy and all these other things where, it's hard to say exactly even what it is, let alone when it started. In this case, I use this because it's when the actual currency was first used. So you could see this as being analogous, let's say, to a country. Like people say, when do you draw up the chart of a country? Because there's a lot of things that you could use. Like, countries often start, especially modern countries, as a result of a revolution, overthrowing the previous country. Like for the U.S., the date of July 4th, 1776 is said to be when it first became the United States, because it was like a point of no return. This is what you want to look for. There's like a point of no return. We've declared our independence. It's like the Declaration of Independence. Before that, there were many things that had happened. You'd had the First Continental Congress and all these other things that were before, but there wasn't a declaration. We're now declaring our independence, right? Let's say like Iran. You could say that the modern Iran started when the Shah of Iran was overthrown, the previous regime. But there was actually a moment when they declared the new state had begun. And that's when you would say it started. So that's what this chart is, when the first blockchain was used. And so the reason I even did the case studies, because it's very compelling when you look at, especially the fact that the chart of Bitcoin just went through a major Dasa shift. At its inception, from January 3rd, 2009, it was Saturn Dasha. And it's a Cancer ascendant with Ketu in the first, Saturn ruling the 7th house and also ruling Rahu, which is very much about shadowy stuff, Mercury, which is the 12th lord, and a debilitated Jupiter. Again, this doesn't portend very well. Financial chart, business chart with debilitated Jupiter. It's a tricky thing to sort of manage, and Saturn itself is retrograde in the house of currency. At least this is the Dasha planet in the house of money, and it's retrograde. And again, second house is money, meaning like dollars, not wealth, like an abstraction. Cryptocurrency is a very abstract, even for fiat capital, it's very abstract. And Saturn also rules all these planets in the 7th and the 8th houses, but it also, rules planets that are, that wind up forming yogas. For example, Jupiter is a 9th lord in the 7th, which is a Raj Yoga. Rahu forms a Raj Yoga with Jupiter as being in an angle with the ruler of the trine, and Saturn was ruling that at the time of the chart, or at the time of the first blockchain. So there are things that showed why this chart looks good. Even the whole cryptocurrency, very Saturn, Rahu, Ketu right on the ascendant at that moment. And also the ruling planet is in the 9th house, which also has to do with wealth, money, and it's in the nakshatra ruled by Saturn, Uttar Bhadrapada. So in Saturn Sun Dasha, again Saturn Sun, the Sun also rules Saturn. Saturn rules the. So there are a lot of things, and also Saturn Sun is the ruler of this Raja Yoga, especially of Jupiter, because it's in Uttarashada, ruled by Saturn and the Sun. So you can see why there are strong indicators of why this could show the inception of what this company is in an overall sense. But then when the company went into Mercury Dasha, September of 2017, this is the chart of Bitcoin's growth for the last year. September of 2017, what's the actual date? September what? September 14th. My mouse just hit. September 14th is this day right here. This is September 14th. It was 8,300. Now, it started to rise earlier, like right before that. You started to see a big rise. And if we even push this back a little further, if we go back a little further, even this is December 2016. It's still maintained, but then around April or May of 2017, it started to rise. But then you really start to see the spike June, July, it sort of dropped a little bit. But then around here, this is August. Now September 14th, this is August 14th. It goes up. September 14th, it actually dropped a little bit. But then it had just had a spike. and then all of a sudden it shoots up after September 14th. After a little lull, it goes bam. You're like, well, why are you saying it's going to crash if once Mercury Dasha started, it skyrocketed up? You want to understand a couple things, and this is why I made the prediction. So, from Saturn Dasha to Mercury Dasha, and again, this is because I've read charts for 15 years, there's always just a good feeling. Saturn is like keeping everything stable and solid. Steady growth, steady growth. Let's go back and look at the Saturn Dasha. Look, it like flatlined. It was like, look at this. Look at the price of it here. $3, $100, jumped up to $1,000 in the end of 2013. All of a sudden spiked. 2013, 2014, but then look, steady growth, steady. Saturn steady within a couple $100, steady. 2016, and then all of a sudden, as we get closer to Mercury, we start seeing an uptick. Like, this is what it feels like when you go from Saturn to Mercury Dasha. Like, oh, the hardest days are over. They're behind me. I've gone through this hardship, this difficulty. Now there's going to be fun and lightness and possibility. This is the change from Saturn to Mercury Dasha. We're just seeing it in this example, but it's this example in life as well. Okay? And so this bump that started right as Mercury was coming, and then right as Mercury started for the first few months, look, it exploded up to 19,000 on December 16th, 2017. Right? So Mercury Dasha starts, and it just gives this good feeling. Things are going to be easier now, lighter. And Mercury literally rules money and fluidity and cash and activity, commerce activity. And so a lot of trading, speculation, blockchains. Yeah, we can make this profitable. And you have a lot more developers, and it became a thing. But what I said at the time, and remember I made the prediction right around here. There was no reason for me to say it because most people weren't, frankly. I mean, some people were, but literally about a month earlier, when I made the prediction, about a month earlier, Bitcoin was 20,000. You had people, almost 20,000. You had people saying, oh, it's just a temporary dip. It's going to launch back up to 20 and go up to 30 or 50, whatever. It had a lull, then it went up to 17. Then at the time I made the prediction, it was 11 or 12. It had just been around there, and I said, no, it's going to flame out here. And then I basically said that it's not going to be the standard, and that it's not going to be what people think it is. And those are the indications that I got when I read the chart because of this whole quality with the 12th house ruler. You want to understand that one planet, the most devastating planet for financial loss, is the 12th house ruler. Always. The second house ruler is gains of income. 12th house ruler is loss. When you get the second house ruler in the 12th, you can see that the person's going to have up and down fortunes. They could maybe gain sometime, but they're going to also have losses. Okay? Especially loss of income and money. And if you're looking at a financial chart, the 12th Lord can be devastating because it shows loss. Plain and simple. It's a simple concept. Losing things. Now again, it's also why it's a moksha house, because liberation also means loss. We think loss is bad. Loss is also liberation. But we're not talking about a person. We're not talking about losing the false qualities of the ego, which is the 12th Lord in a natal chart, which is what we need to be able to do, is to let go and surrender and lose our ego. If you're looking at a financial chart, or somebody's asking you about finances, and they just started the dasha of the 12th Lord, or Rahu in the 12th, or something like that, or something that rules it and whatnot, you want to understand that the 12th is often difficult for money. It can be. By the way, I just started the dasha of the 12th Lord. So again, you also have to look at other things. Mine's the 12th lord, but it's also forming a Raja Yoga in the first, 3 or 4 Raja Yogas in the first. It's also ruling other things. So it's not just the 12th lord. But in something like this especially, again, with a human being, we're very subtle. And companies can also be very subtle. But again, you have to look at the nature of the company and look at the possibilities here. Particularly when you're talking about something like cryptocurrency, online, the potential for deceit, lies, confusion, things like, hacking, and all of the imagined fears and secrets and lies and corruption that can come out, especially on the internet. The internet is very much a 12th house thing anyway. Wasting our time on the internet is 12th house. Escapism. Not paying attention to the details because we're all excited about the possibilities of the future, the prospects of the future. All that can be what makes us lose our money, lose our time. So these are these qualities of the 12th house is why I said, I see Mercury Dasha happening right on the edge of this trend, of this wild ups and downs, because it can show some ups, especially Saturn to Mercury. Oh, we're no longer in Saturn. Yay! It's easier now, lighter. Yeah, let's get a flurry of activity. And then it skyrockets up. Then drops. Then comes up at another lull. Again, most people at this time, late January, were saying, well, it might hit another little lull, but then it's going to skyrocket back up again. Just like this. It skyrocketed up to 15, right? Or no, 16 here on December 8th. Then it went down to 14. Then it went up to 17. Then it went back to 16. Then it went to 19. Then here it was at 16 again. There was a little lull when I recorded this. There was no reason to think it wouldn't jump back up to 16 and then 20 and then way up in the stratosphere like people said. But no. As we stand right now, this is the live ticker. It's barely been able to hold 7,000 for quite a while now. If we go back for the last month, here's the ticker for the last month. It's popped over 11,000 like once, briefly for March 2nd until March 5th, and then down, to 85. Then it can barely hold 9,000. It holds 9,000 for a few days here, and just for a second here. The rest of it is 8,000, 7,000. Now it's at 68. So as you can see, the trend for the last month, just going down and down. And again, there are a couple reasons why at the time I made the prediction, there were also a couple other factors coming. One of them was the eclipse cycle that was about to hit the first house, because there was a lunar eclipse in Cancer at that time, with Rahu going through the first house of Bitcoin and Ketu going over the 7th house and all these planets. And I said, this is going to show a lot of volatility. It could show some deceit. It could show hacking and all these other things that people are afraid of. Since then, there have been several blows against the currency in itself, just as something that people would prospect. Like, for example, Google has stopped listing cryptocurrency like ads and stuff. Look, all it would take is for a couple of these companies, like let's say Facebook. Let's say Facebook starts outlaws Bitcoin, anything. Like they just say, no, this, we already see Google cracking down on ads for Bitcoin and these kinds of speculation, especially now with all this cracking down on the scams and frauds from elections and all. One of the things about Bitcoin is it's used by international criminals. This cryptocurrency is a shady... I'm not saying that's all it's used for, so don't give me hate mail. I'm saying, though, that it's used in these anonymous transactions, and it has that stain of it. It's not backed by anything. The fiat capital is also backed by banks. You don't have to give me a lesson on it. I understand how it works, and I'm just analyzing it, but the cryptocurrency especially is even more fiat and less reliable than even the international banking, house of cards that we have, which is nothing but fiat capital. Cryptocurrency is even worse because you can't even hardly spend it on anything. It's actually, the whole thing is speculation at this point. There's almost nothing. Go out to dinner tonight and pay for it with Bitcoin. It's totally a speculation at this point, almost completely. You almost can't spend Bitcoins on anything. I mean, of course, I know if you go, there are things that you can spend it on, but most day-to-day stuff, you can't go out to the stores and spend Bitcoin everywhere, right? And even at places where you can, all it would take would be for a couple of things to go south, and retailers or whatever would pull the plug on honoring the currency. The first thing about something like a currency is it has to be respected. No matter what someone might say about greenbacks or dollars or the fiat capital, it's at least spendable, like everywhere. So these are the things that I said, especially with the cryptocurrency market that's getting worked out. Bitcoin is so complicated, and all of these complexities are being shown with the transits, with the fact that there was just eclipses here. We're going to have more eclipses because we're going to have a solar eclipse in Cancer in the summer. Rahu is going to continue to go through, and then the solar eclipses, in Capricorn and whatnot. So this whole axis of Bitcoin is getting eclipsed, and the fears and the things that could sink it could be really difficult. And we're seeing how, so far at least, these predictions are playing out pretty right on at this point. And again, I could be wrong. It could shoot up to the stratosphere, but a lot of, when you see these hardcore like crypto investors now, it's getting harder and harder to say, oh yeah, this is just a correction. It's going to recover. And by the way, a lot of these prices are from what are called whales coming in and buying it all up. Like buying a lot of, Bitcoin and inflating the price. Especially these big spikes is because people down here bought like 1 million Bitcoin to make the price then this expensive, and then they sell it once people want to buy it. Then the people that bought it here sell it all, and then it drops all the way down. It's nothing but speculation. It's gambling at this point. People are gambling that once the fiat capital international monetary banking system collapses, we'll all be using Bitcoin. Okay, if we all have computers and enough retailers take it, perhaps, or some version of that. And again, I said a couple of the things. I said these were just opinions, ideas that I thought that because of what it takes to mine Bitcoins and the computer power that it takes to create blockchains and whatnot, at some point it stops being profitable, because for there to be more Bitcoin, you have to have enough people that want to mine the Bitcoin. And it costs they say it costs about $3,000 to $4,000, maybe $5,000 to even create one Bitcoin, because of how complicated it is to even create a Bitcoin. That once it drops below a certain point and stops being profitable, there's no reason to do it anymore. So all of the technological prohibitions, and plus just the complexities on a mass scale that would make this something that would catch on, like, Google, which is a search engine, or Apple, or even lesser companies, makes it very hard for people to invest in Bitcoin. Not to mention, again, the fact that it's kind of like gambling. It's not money. You're betting on a future, and the fact that it's like, even now it's like $8,000 for a Bitcoin. Who in the heck's going to spend $8,000 on something that is just a kind of, I'm sorry, 6,800. Who's going to spend that kind of money on something where they don't even really know how to use it? So there's a lot of things about it. The cryptocurrency market in general has some growing pains to go through. And what I said in general was that sometimes and oftentimes the first one in the market isn't the one that survives because of the complexities with technology or what have you. And I have a feeling we're going to have a centralized sort of, blockchain-based sort of cryptocurrency standard at some point. But I don't think it's going to be Bitcoin. I think it's going to be something easier, that's easier to manage, and probably something that's a go-between between the fiat capital banking system and crypto technology, something that's easier to understand. just like Facebook has been the big winner, but it wasn't the first social media site. It's kind of like MySpace perfected, and Google wasn't the first search engine. It's kind of like the Lycos browser or Netscape, perfected. So we can see, based on the dashas and the transits and these eclipses and the fact that Bitcoin is ruled by Mercury. Bitcoin is Cancer, and Mercury, the 12th Lord, is the dasha. And as soon as that dasha ran, the unpredictability and volatility of the 12th Lord started, like right here. Now, it's as low as it's been, I think, in a long time, if not since it dropped to about 68. What was it here? It was 6,000. Here it's still 68. So, it dropped. Oh, did it just go to 59? Where is it as we speak? Where are we at now? 68. Okay. But I think it dropped just recently to its lowest. This was 64. The lowest it's gotten to 68. Yeah, so it's just been, tanking and barely able to hold even 8,000. Whereas back when I made the prediction, it was 11,000. Again, you might say 8 or 11. That's a third of its value has gone down since I said that. And again, maybe it'll shoot back up. I don't know. It's volatile. But given these cycles that we're in, and since I made the prediction, I'll stay on top of it. If it jumps up more, I'll say, well, here's what happened. But especially because Mercury rules the 12th, it was right before that lunar eclipse, and Rahu, by transit, is in the sky. This is where Rahu is. This is where Rahu is in the sky right now. This is April 1st, 2018. Rahu is at 19 degrees, and it's bearing down on the exact degrees of the Bitcoin chart. 15, 14, Rahu is bearing down on it. I think it's going to make more volatility and more loss as Rahu gets close to the Ascendant. And again, so my advocacy of using this chart is bearing itself out. Some people said this chart wasn't good to use. I think it is. And we're seeing, again, this lunar node return as Ketu is going to continue to get closer and closer to Mercury and Jupiter. Ketu is going to continue to get closer and closer to Mercury, Jupiter in the 12th house. Let's run this forward and see when the eclipses hit this summer. So the eclipses are going to hit this summer when Rahu is about 10 or 11, right? So the eclipses this summer are going to hit right on the ascendant of Bitcoin. Kaboom! And the sun, especially, is the planet of, again, that consistent power, vision, and whatnot. That is ruled by the sun. I didn't even talk about Chardash and all that, which I could talk about, and maybe I will at some point. But you can see why my prediction was, I should have said, or I could say, at least for the next year and a half or so, as Rahu is going through the first house, and all these eclipses are hitting, I would stay away from Bitcoin. I would let it tank. If it's going to come back, it's going to come back after this is finished. And maybe when it gets into Mercury K2, perhaps. But again, when I look at the company overall and even what it is and why people would buy it or not, just as a sensible matter, I'm not certain that this is really going to be something that this particular version of cryptocurrency is going to be the one that wins out. And again, if you start researching what it takes to even mine Bitcoins and the absolutely complicated, confusing, and power prohibitive nature of being able to use Bitcoin, you start to realize why it's not as simple as you might think. And there was a recent article that I read that's also quite fascinating. And the article is how network theory predicts the value of Bitcoin. And these are true scholars. These aren't speculators on the internet. These are people that analyze market trends and value of things, especially speculations and whatnot. Metcalfe's law, which measures the value of network, can calculate a cryptocurrency's value and predict when to get out. And basically, if you read this article, it says that it's probably that here it is. Our Metcalfe-based analysis indicates current support levels for the Bitcoin market in the range of 22 to 44 billion, at least 4 times less than the current level. So you could probably exit by about a quarter, which means maybe 1,500. That would be probably the actual value of Bitcoin right now, and that the rest is inflated. And so perhaps, even like based on this kind of research, which again, these are algorithmic research tools. If you want to read this, it's very interesting. You could see these are trends that are these sort of comparative analyses are based on, again, research where you crunch an algorithm of maybe, I don't know how they did it here, but different speculation models, and you look at trends to see how many users are there, how many trades, what's the value, and you see a curve. So again, it could be like that's perhaps the actual value now, but then what happens if it starts to drop and trading starts to slow down? The actual value then also starts to drop. So even though the virtual value right now, or the speculative value is like 6,800, let's say the actual value is maybe about 1,500, maybe about, like about a quarter. Is that a quarter? Yeah, that would be 6,000. So yeah, maybe like 1,700. But then once this virtual value starts to drop, let's say to 3 or 4, or let's say it goes down to 4 or 5, then the actual value also starts to drop to maybe 1,000. So again, these trend lines don't look well for Bitcoin at this point. We'll see what happens, but I just wanted to keep you up to date. Again, this is an astrology case study, not a cryptocurrency case study, although I am talking about it because I've gotten kind of interested in researching it now to see how it works and to see why things might be up or down, and reading a lot of speculation and some very scholarly articles on it. And some of this website here, Crypto Compare, is very interesting because there's also forums, and you can compare other cryptos as well, just to sort of look at it. I'm just looking at it. I don't have any interest in speculating or buying it, but I just find it to be a pretty interesting thing to look at, and especially to read like forum posts, and some very informed people give their trends and their forecasts here. And much of it, especially the more sober people who aren't just there trying to get rich on Bitcoin, have some interesting things to say. Again, the last thing I'll say is you have to realize this is actually what it is at this point. It's like prospecting. Because it's not a commodity, it's a gamble. It's like you're not buying something. You're betting that it's going to be worth more at some point. So it's purely gambling. To some extent, you're gambling that if you buy it at 6,800 today, 6 months from now, maybe you could sell it for, 10,000 and make profit, because you're not getting anything other than the possibility that you could make more later. So anything that's that amorphous, especially that even to buy one of them now is 8,000, and of course you buy portions of it. You don't have to buy one whole Bitcoin, but this whole idea that it's not something like you're buying the future of, like cattle futures, where you're betting on the fact that people are going to be eating meat, or you're investing in a company like, Coca-Cola. You're investing in the idea that people are going to want to keep drinking more Coca-Cola, for example. This is investing in the fact that one day you'll be able to sell this for more money, and then one day, far in the future, it'll be a standardized currency, and it'll be worth and it'll be worth more than you paid for it. Because again, this is the point. Someday it might be a reasonably standardized currency, but the fact that it's going to be worth 6,000 per Bitcoin is a whole other issue as well. So all of these things are cooked into why someone would do that and what they're doing at this point when they invest in it. So anyway, I hope this was an interesting case study. And I'm not just trying to do it to brag or show that I'm right. I mainly wanted to do it to show you why I said what I said. And we can clearly see this is the chart. I think it's a legitimate chart. It makes sense for what we're looking at. It makes sense that this is a cryptocurrency company, right? It makes sense that I would make a prediction back when, back before we were at this time of solar eclipse, back before we hit this lunar eclipse, I made the prediction like back around, it was around this time, around early January, it was around here. It was actually, the moon was up here. So it was about right somewhere around here. Somewhere around here is when I made the prediction. Late January. Oh, this is March. Okay. So, sorry, go back. Yeah, it was somewhere around here that I made the prediction. Because I could see that we were going to have these eclipses. I could see we were going to have these eclipses coming, and how those eclipses were going to get closer and really crunch on the chart of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin just started this Mercury Dasa, which was about loss. It was like, if I'm looking at it right now, these trend lines look like, these trend lines look like 12th house volatility. And, sorry. These trend lines look like 12th house volatility and not something that's going to be recoverable. At the time when I looked at it right here, I was like, I don't think we're going to have a drop off and then another skyrocket up to 20. This looks like loss. And the volatility of loss, eclipses, wild speculation. Again, the chart of Bitcoin has Rahu in the first right now. Can you see why there could be some wild speculation? Come on, we're going to make a lot of money. A lot of Rahu around Bitcoin right now. So we're seeing that play out.